Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is a brief tour of some flowering things here in our garden in Raleigh, North Carolina in early April. Went out to California for about a week and came back and the garden had just really exploded. You know, when you take a break from it and you don't see it for a few days, you really get to see how fast it actually fills in as everything is waking up. You don't get that if you're looking at it every day, every afternoon when you come home. But any kind of gap this time of year is just like, wow. You know, as an example of that, this Dr. Rupel clematis had one flower on it, and go to California, come back 6 days later, and this is what you have. It's in the process of climbing this corner fence. It's only the second year in the ground, and clematis go from putting on sometimes this much growth in the first year and maybe a little more than that in the second year. And the third year, it can eat this, the top of this fence, right out of the ground. And so it'll look different each year. There are 3 clematis planted along the fence. Dr. Rupel's definitely the earliest of those and probably the most showy. So we've got lots of things in flower. So let's jump around and look at them. So on one of our visits down to Tom and Ram Giberson's garden in Athens last year, you can't leave that garden without Ram putting things in the trunk as you go away. And one of those was this buckeye. And so we came home, planted it along the edge of the property. And hopefully she's watching this video. We're getting our first couple of flowers on it. It's always exciting to have plants in the garden that have a story, either from friends and family, whatever it is, found it on the side of the road. It just makes them interesting. We have quite a few of those in the garden. And I've kind of decided that this is such a limited space in this 0.19 acre lot that, plants need to have a story. So that's what we're looking for as we, go forward in our travels and add things and make decisions about this garden. It's nice that I can look at something and have a memory from it of a trip or, people, places, that kind of thing. But this buckeye is from Tom and Ram's garden. There are lots of hummingbirds back in the area already, and you can see, this red fluted flower is kind of the perfect flower to entice them into the garden early in the season. The Serviceberry has reached peak flowering, and so lots and lots of pollinators out here, which you'll see on some of these native plants. Is just interesting flying creatures around them. It's not just, bees and butterflies and hummingbirds that make pollinators, but there's all kinds of things. When you have native plants in your garden that are also pollinators, lots of interesting little flying wasps and things like that. So the Serviceberry's in full flower. I've got to do a little bit more pruning on this. It still has a very crowded top. It's way too tall for its own good for the girth that it has. And so in the next week or two, I'm definitely going to come up in here and again, thin the interior on it a little bit, reduce the height a little bit so that I can continue to thicken this trunk up. But this Autumn Brilliant Serviceberry is truly a 4-season plant. So we've got these flowers coming on it now, which will turn to an edible fruit, and the birds more than likely will get that edible fruit. If the fruit turns out good, it's incredible. It's actually, to me, almost better than blueberries. It just doesn't have much of a shelf life, so you got to eat it right off the tree. And then foliage on it's great during the season. Of course, we haven't had any height in this garden since we started this project, and so this is a great place for the birds to be able to sit and observe the things that they're hunting for in the garden. And then in the fall, it has incredible fall foliage. So, again, it's one of those plants that's always doing something out here in the garden. We managed to protect the flowers on the Rosalinda Indian hawthorn through a couple freezes during March, and now we're being rewarded for it. These flowers are incredibly showy. They're very large for Indian hawthorns. That cluster is about the size of a softball. They get larger than that. They're just in the process of opening up. They're incredibly fragrant. Beautiful, beautiful plant. That light pink flower against that dark green foliage is so striking. This one's in a tree form. You can't really see that down low because the bulbs are up around the base of it right now. Eventually those bulbs will fade back to the ground and it'll be a perfect little round, evergreen tree form. And then it does this in the spring with these incredibly fragrant flowers. This is a snow joey viburnum, which is almost in full bloom. It hasn't completely opened yet. This is a fragrant flower as well, but it is, to me, it can be a tiny bit funky. Some of these white flowering shrubs in the spring can be, not the best of fragrance. It's so sweet, it's, you know, passes by what to me is a good fragrance. And then other people will smell this and say it smells wonderful. So, you know, I may be the one that's wrong on that. This is a beautiful shrub. It comes out, flowers heavily like this in the spring, has just great, almost birch-like foliage on it during the growing season. And then in the fall, it turns this really amazing reddish, rusty fall color and holds that for most of the winter. It's actually very late winter before it drops those leaves. This one had unfortunately leafed out a little early on its own, you know, a little ahead of schedule this year, like a lot of things. Got burnt a little bit in one of those frosts, so it's got a few brown leaves you're seeing on it, but that was from a late frost, but it didn't damage any of the flower buds on it. Not in an ideal position out here. We're going to be removing these azaleas that are directly behind me, and it's going to slide back some and give it a little bit more space is the idea with this thing. So that'll be a transplanting video later in the season, but this is Viburnum luzonicum snow joey. This is Burning Love leucothoe, which you won't believe me right this minute, spends most of its year very purple. But right now, coming out of winter, it puts on this big show of these dangling like flowers. A lot of things, ericaceous plants have these little dangling bell-like flowers down below them. Blueberries, you know, are like that. Pieris is like that. This Burning Love leucothoe will go from this, what looks like this beautiful white flowering shrub, then new growth will start on it, and all the new growth will be this really amazing purple color, and this thing will just go back to being purple, and it'll be that way in the landscape summer, fall, through most of the winter before it turns back to green to really show off these white flowers. I absolutely love this plant. This plant was in the display out in California in a big group, and it's just, everyone's drawn to it when they see it just completely covered in purple. It's just a super, super interesting leucothoe. When you're a plant collector and your garden reflects that, and you have what I would call designing with drifts of one, you end up with little spots where, you know, it's not all quite working out. And this Autumn Majesty Encore azalea would prefer to be in a little more space. And so it either needs to move, or that snow joey moving back might fix the issue we have. But we have a little bit of a crowd here of shrubs. They're gonna have to be rearranged a bit, but we knew that with the amount of variety of species that are in, or variety of taxa that are in this garden. This Autumn Majesty Encore azalea is one of the absolute most floriferous varieties of Encore azalea. This thing just really puts on a show. It leans more toward purple, and I think back here in this, with the sun hitting it this morning, and the camera's never good at picking up any purple in anything, it's probably going to appear fairly pink, but it is a double, you know, almost purple flowering variety, and it'll bloom heavily now, and then we'll get some flowers on it during the summer, and then it'll come back into full flower in the fall. Probably better in the fall, honestly, than in the spring. And it's perfectly happy here, but I think ultimately it's going to need a little bit more light than these other shrubs are allowing it to have. But in the meantime, couldn't be any more showy than it is right now. This is a native blueberry. This variety is called Rosa's Blush. Another one of those plants that's just always doing something. It's coming to full flower right now. It does produce blueberries. They are edible. We really just have it out here as a decorative piece. The birds will take the blueberries when the blueberries are ready. The reason it's called Rosa's Blush is because all of the new growth on it is kind of a blush pink color. So what you're seeing, just like on that, back on that leucothoe, is it's kind of greenish while it's in full flower, and then all the new growth that comes out on it will have this pinkish hue to it all spring and early to mid and late summer as the berries form on it. Beautiful, beautiful plant. I've seen these tree formed. I've seen them kept as small shrubs. I've seen them planted in large groups. Just a great native to the southeast species of blueberry that then has these beautiful flowers and beautiful berries and beautiful foliage. This is a native azalea, and it's called Sun Glow. It's part of a series called Sun Bow. I think there's 3 in that series from the Southern Living Plant Collection. These are Buddy Lee creations, and they are incredibly showy. This one leans more toward an orange color. There's one called Solar Flare that's a little bit more, has a little bit more yellow in it. These were not only picked for their flowers, which are great for all the native pollinators and, you know, pretty long bloomed here as they come out in the middle spring. They were also picked because they have very, very clean foliage. A lot of times we talk about some of the fall color on these native azaleas, but a lot of times the foliage just looks kind of terrible toward the mid and late summer. But these just really, really look great as landscape ornamental plants. And so you're getting that, you know, big pop of color that you can't really get on other azaleas. You know, on other azaleas, you're gonna get the reds, pinks, and purples and whites. And on these deciduous azaleas, you can get these yellows and oranges and these incredibly vibrant colors. These are just starting to open up. They'll be blooming for a while now. And again, as it warms up later in the day, we'll see pollinators come from far and wide for these deciduous azaleas. This will be the last couple flowering things for this video. We have lots of other things that are in the process of opening up. Just a few days from now, there'll be a whole nother group of things just kind of, you know, really, really quickly coming to life here. There are 3 Encore azaleas planted down, well, one's in an actual container and 2 are planted down below our screen. We feel pretty fortunate overall that there's very little damage in the landscape. There's a couple things, I got a couple viburnum that definitely aren't blooming like we would expect them to bloom, and I'm sure that's winter damage. A couple things here or there that were, you know, got hit a little bit during the winter freeze, but I feel pretty fortunate over here in the middle of North Carolina. We definitely didn't have anything like folks back in Tennessee and on the other side of the mountains definitely had. And this garden is matured enough that there's things helping block wind and that kind of thing. So, you know, the azaleas are pretty much unharmed. This is Autumn Fire, the dwarf red one down here below me. If you're looking for a dwarf Encore azalea, Autumn Fire is extremely reliable. You know, every time I had this at the old house, I've had it here, and it's just consistently, you know, blooms in the landscape and stays very small. After it flowers is the time to prune azaleas, and so that would include the deciduous azalea back there, any azalea pretty much, or rhododendron. These things carry their flower buds through the winter, then they'll do some sort of spring show, and if they need any pruning, that's the time to do it, is right after they do that, because these will just flush right back out, set buds, and bloom again. So this is Autumn Fire. The slightly taller one in the container is Autumn Bonfire. It needs to find a home. It may not find a home in this garden. I may actually give this one away and then put something else into this container. We've got Autumn Lilac, which is a light purple. We'll show you in the next video that's starting to open up, and then a white one over here on the end. But both of these are very, very showy. Autumn Fire is, you know, one of the smallest growing doming ones if you need something that's really small and compact. Bonfire is just slightly taller than that. Bonfire blooms like mad. Both of them are almost red. You know, they're as red as, you know, red as we have in Encore azaleas, and just, you know, Fire truly is a really good, really good low doming, small growing landscape plant. And I think both of these are zone 6 hardy. So you need to look that up. If you're in zone 6 and you want to grow Encores, there are about half of them are zone 6 hardy, about half of them are not. So there's some of the things that, since I left for California, that came into flower. And as I look around behind Steph and the camera, there's just, the whole garden is coming to life very, very quickly. There's lots of things to go in the ground, and just lots of activity out here. So thanks for following along with it.